Okay, folks, welcome back. We are back in the Contrarians, not in person, of course, but we are here to do another review. Once again, we're going with the new show format. We're doing the worst album agreed, and you might notice a new face here. This is Graham. He's a longtime member of the Contrarians. You might not have seen him on camera yet, but you've been hearing his words and you've been hearing his research, and that's what allows me and Marco to try and keep up with Martin. So thank you for all your hard work, Graham. And it's great to see you in front of the camera.
No problem.
So I hear we're here for Slayer today, and interestingly enough, you I think are a Slayer mega fan, whereas I am more of a trying to think of a fancy word here. I'm not a huge Slayer fan, but I think we both agree on the worst album. And would you like to reveal what that is?
It is Diabolus in Musica. I'm not sure when it is chronologically. It's between Undisputed Attitude and God Hates Us All.
Okay. So I'm not familiar with Undisputed Attitude, but
God
Hates Us All.
The cover songs, mostly hard cover songs.
Oh, I have heard of that one. That one's also, I think, considered not to be strong, right?
It wasn't really well received. It's a bit unusual.
So I guess without giving away exactly what we think, maybe we can go over kind of the history of this album and maybe the reasons why we both think it's the worst one. Would you like to start, or would you like to hear my opinion on the album first?
You can go ahead.
All right. Well, my opinion on it is fairly simple. I don't really like the whole sound of that album, the whole genre of it. It's I've read a lot of people calling it a nu metal album. I don't think it's a nu metal album, and I don't think it's a bad album. But to me, it's too groovy. It's not
right.
It's not aggressive enough for Slayer, and it's still a very, very aggressive album. But when you go from something like Rain and Blood, or even God Hates Us All, and you go to Diabolus and Musica, it's I think the word is just disappointing, right? I think Kerry King said that they did it to kind of fit in with the times, and it's disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, Slayer is a band that really, in the beginning, they went through some kind of stylistic changes. They were very heavily Venom influenced, especially in their debut album Show No Mercy. And as far as the big four thrash metal bands, Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer, they were definitely the darker lyrically and more aggressive sounding.
Oh, I would definitely say they're the heaviest.
Oh, absolutely they are. And they tore through the 80s with Rain and Blood and South of Heaven, and in 1990, I believe, were Seasons in the Abyss, all just great albums. Before their album, Divine Intervention, they had a change. Drummer Dave Lombardo, definitely one of the strong suits of Slayer from the beginning, he quit and was replaced by Paul Bostaph, which wasn't a serious loss. I mean, I prefer Lombardo's style a bit more. Divine Intervention is still, I'm not a big fan of the mix, but it's still very much a Slayer album. Mm-hmm. It still carries a lot of like the essence, the like pitch black themes about serial killers and genocides. And it definitely has a lot of the attitude, the kind of in your face, just nasty and uncompromising.
Yeah.
But by the late 1990s, like I think there was a change in scenery. Heavy metal was very well established, even in the cultural mainstream by that time. And I think like that was past the prime era of thrash metal. Like the late 1980s were just the golden age of thrash. And a lot of up and coming and more popular bands started to do different kind of style, I think.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Yeah, as part of the groove metal element of Diabolus and Musica, I think that might have been influenced by the popularity of bands like Pantera, who kind of had that sort of mid-tempo pacing.
That's a really, really astute band to bring up. What was I I was listening to one of the songs on the album today. I can't remember, and I was like, this reminds me of a band, and I couldn't think of what it was. And you said that, it just clicked. Yeah, it reminded me of Pantera. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of differences. Like, obviously, Slayer was very influential to Pantera, but by this album, by Diabolus and Musica, they were almost trying to veer into that sound, and it just does not work.
Mm-hmm.
It, like, on songs like Stain of Mind and Death's Head, they're trying to definitely have some kind of groove. Now with Pantera, one of the reasons that they can hold a groove like that, I think, is their bassist, Rex Brown. I mean, he had jazz training when he was in high school. He definitely has, he's more prominent, he's higher in the mix on Pantera. And that really works to their pacing. With Slayer, it's just not the same. Yeah. Slayer really has to have, like, brooding and then really rapid fire pacing. Mm-hmm. There's very little in between that they could do. And Tom Araya just doesn't have, I think, the strength on the bass that Rex Brown did, which is why moving towards a groove metal sound on Diabolus and Musica just doesn't work. It's just out of place at best.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because Araya is definitely like a very skilled bassist. There's no denying that. But I think I do agree with what you're saying, and part of it, at least, I think to me is the double duty he's pulling. It's very difficult to get into a bass, like a rhythm groove, while you're doing a lead vocal as well, and especially his style of vocal is very, very intense. A lot of energy, a lot of effort involved.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that especially the vocals, that's probably my main problem with Diabolus and Musica. Is I don't know. He's really experimenting with his approach, and there are parts of it that almost sound like he's trying to be Zach De La Rocca from Rage Against the Machine, almost like bordering on rap.
Yeah,
which is not like his in-your-face shouting style does not work with that.
No,
that's really where the album kind of just becomes a bit much.
Yeah. Oh, see, now there's another band that I'm thinking of that it kind of reminds me of. I think it's Suicidal Tendencies, that kind of almost yelling, but there's that extra emotional content, and some people can do it well, but I agree that Slayer, for them, it's not their strength. Their strength lies in intensity, not in subtlety.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we can also we've kind of hinted at it. We can go over kind of this album's place in history. You were talking about the band's history at that time, but I just wanted to point out that during this time is when nu metal is really starting to kick off, and nu metal is very groovy. There's a lot of hip hop elements that are added into it, and I believe, and I wish I had pulled it up here, I believe that Kerry King actually even said that they were trying to experiment with the new sound, not necessarily selling out, because it's still not a commercial album,
right?
But it was an experiment, and it didn't necessarily fail, but I think it definitely showed that they're not great at everything. Oh, we might have lost you here. You're frozen.
Right, exactly.
Oh, there you go. You came back.
Am I frozen?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Yeah, there definitely was the sign of the times that nu metal in the late 1990s was getting pretty popular. I mean, damn near everyone was listening to Limp Bizkit or even Marilyn Manson and Slipknot, and that definitely bled over into this album. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of a very weird choice, because they had already established themselves one of the major influential thrash metal bands, and I could understand creatively them trying to diversify, but this was definitely territory they should not have gone down. Because it doesn't play to their strengths. even the guitar work, which is decent here, a lot of it just sounds flat. Like they're not trying anything new or exciting. They're just doing something that's very conventional.
See, that's very interesting because it is, on the one hand, you're right, it's their experimental album, but it's also a kind of unoriginal album. Even the title, Diabolus in Musica, they're referring to the devil's tritone in music.
Right.
And I feel like every kid who plays guitar, who, you know, takes guitar lessons, at one point their guitar teacher is like, "Oh, did you know there's a devil's tritone?" And you're like, "Oh, that's too. I'm gonna put that in a metal song."
Yeah.
Because it's the most dissonant. It's the most dissonant step, and it's not, like, lazy is a wrong word, unoriginal is a wrong word to use, but it's almost like a trap. It's less original than you think. It's almost
well
getting into
ground.
Yeah, it's almost getting into that we're heavy through being unappealing instead of heaviness through aggression, which is what they were renowned for. Okay, well, we've talked a little bit about the album. We've kind of talked about its place in history and why we don't think it's as great. But I'm interested to know, what is your actual rating of this album? Do you actually dislike it, or do you just think it's not a very strong entry?
Do I dislike this? I wouldn't say that if I ever hear something from Diabolus and Musica, I'm just not outraged. I'm not like, this is just an abomination, like Saint Anger level bad. I'd say that I'd say at worst it's a misdirection, a misfire. There's a couple of good songs, Perversions of Pain, Bitter Peace, that kind of has a more late 90s kind of sound, while retaining Slayer's trademark aggression. But ultimately, it misses more often than it hits. It's something that's definitely more regrettable. Oddly enough, it was then drummer Paul Bostap's favorite of them all, which is a bit weird. They rarely, when they were playing live, they rarely played any tracks live, and I can understand why. I don't hate the album, but it's the last Slayer album I could recommend. So I'd give it about a 5 out of 10.
Wow. Okay.
I think that it's maybe 4.5 because some tracks are still pretty constant. It's more uninspired than it is like outwardly terrible. So yeah, I give it about 4, maybe 5 out of 10.
Wow. Yeah, that's a little harsher, I think, than I'd be. I think I would land on a 6 out of 10, just because I feel like this is a weird metaphor, and not really a metaphor. I feel like a 6 out of 10 is the perfect number of all the elements were there for something really cool to happen, and then it just it didn't.
Yeah, you're right. It's not terrible. It's not. I'd say it's more the execution than what they had going for it, because it's not offensive to the ears. It's more or less something that they can just put in the past, which is the one good thing about Slayer, is they didn't have just a total catastrophe of an album in their long run.
Yeah, I mean, that in itself is pretty impressive. Like you said, like, it's not a Saint Anger flop.
Yeah.
It's not what's the Megadeth album that everyone hates? Marco, edit the name of the album into this this video. Yeah, it's a good solid. So I think if we're doing the average here, we could say you gave it do you want to say maybe 4 or
5?
5?
I'll be generous, yeah.
Okay, so we'll call this a 5.5 album by the Contrarian standards. It's it's pretty good, but what was the phrase you used? It misses more than it hits.
Yeah, it's definitely something that didn't really make a good transition from writing to production. It definitely kind of faltered in that, but it's not like an outrage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's the worst album. Agreed. Now, if you
Yeah.
disagree and you have a different album, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That's important. That helps us. And don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We are all isolating, but we are going to be doing more episodes like this, and you can look forward to seeing more Graham in the future with his metal knowledge. And yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. Stay safe.
Yep. Take it easy.